Okay.
Great. Well, Happy New Year, everybody. Welcome to the Monday, January 10th Permanent Public Building Committee meeting. And again, we're doing it via Zoom under the same approach we've been doing since the pandemic. Tonight's agenda, we have the public safety, we have the school master plan as the two core elements. We have to approve the minutes, and then we also have other business. We do have one other item in the other business right now. And with that, I would just ask for a motion to approve the last meeting minutes.
I'll recommend approval.
Second.
Second.
Thank you. Great. Any questions? Okay, with that coming to the vote, and again, being the Zoom meeting, doing digital format, we'll do the roll call. And we'll start with Richard.
Aye.
Roy.
Aye.
George.
Aye.
Erwin.
Aye.
Lynn.
Aye.
And Jean.
Aye.
And the chair is aye. Okay. All right, great. Okay, the first main topic is the public safety. To review, I will turn it to you, Ken, to kick off. You got everybody you need here.
Yeah, let me share my screen here. If I can find it. All right, everyone see that okay?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, all right. Talk a little bit about the schedule. The upper level and lower levels are pretty much complete. You know, get touch-up work, some wiring, but for if you walked in there, you'd think it was pretty close to complete. And the work to complete lists are being compiled for the punch lists. The main level ceiling install is substantially complete. MEP finish work is substantially complete. Site work, curbs are complete. Sidewalks are substantially complete. There's a couple more sections to pour. Plaza wall granite panels are delayed, which is holding up the pavers starting. That should be roof edge is substantially complete, not rude. Flooring is substantially complete throughout the building. Over at Fire Station 2, the punch list is substantially complete. Over at the temp, the paving's done. We still have to do the guardrail and the striping. And we're still looking for, well, right now we're still planning on early February, but we've had serious COVID delays with staffing. We've had weeks where whole trades have been out. So stay tuned. Our date of February, or anticipated date of February 8th for substantial completion could be affected by that. But for right now, we're with that, and we'll be moving the week after that. The week of the 14th is what we're scheduled to move in. But as I said, we've got some material and staffing delays for the trades that are affecting us. Anybody with questions on the schedule?
I had my hand up.
George?
Yeah, I can't say, I minimized everyone, George, so I can't.
Okay, that's all right.
see
So I have two questions. One relates to the HVAC substantial completion. Does that mean that we've finished all the balancing in the building?
No. The install is complete.
Just the install?
Right.
So
the balancing is not,
assuming-
and that's one of the things that is holding us up, is because we don't have people there to do the, to start the balancing.
Okay, and who's going to be doing that?
Well, that's the HVAC.
The contractor?
The contractor along with the commissioning agent and the HVAC MB Kenny's subcontractors.
Okay, so it's with the contractor for the HVAC system,
Correct.
and they're complaining that there's not enough people?
Well, every day somebody new is out. You get one back, another one goes out. I mean, most of the, like I said, we had days where we had no plumbers, we've had no electricians, we've had no HVAC guys. It's just, since Christmas, it's just making the rounds.
Yeah.
Like it is throughout everybody else.
Ken, can I jump in?
Yeah, go ahead.
Miles, George, just a good example for you. We had the site open Christmas Eve. There was actually a lot of people there Christmas Eve. The following Monday, we lost 3 trades completely. All the ceramic tile guys, 5 of them, no one showed up Monday. And when I walked in, I was like, what's going on? You guys worked Christmas Eve and no one's here today. All 5 of them are out positive. And that's happened at least 5 different subs where the entire crew's been knocked out when they come back for the weekend.
And these are all vaccinated people.
Not necessarily.
We don't know. We can't ask
Okay, all right,
status.
okay.
It's happening with vaccinated people too. It's happening on all of my projects.
Right. All right. Second question. I assume we're hopefully that will change. We don't know how long it will take to do that, but that of course is something that we've got to be looking at constantly. I'm sure you are. Second item was with regard to, wait a minute, I need to go back to the list here. Oh, had to do with, 1 second. I lost my second item. VP work.
I see your hand, Erwin, so once George is done, I can.
Go ahead to Erwin and I'll come back.
Erwin,
to
you want to
mine.
go?
Yeah, just a quick one. Ken, is there any way to estimate the extent of what the delays are going to be? Or is it just such a wild card with not knowing who's going to be out? Are we looking at weeks or?
That's your second premise is what it is. We just don't know. Every day you come in, like today, one of the plumbers came back and the other one was out. And the other problem we have with, say, like with the electricians, which has been a problem, is that so if an electrician doesn't show up, that means the apprentice can't work, because the apprentice can only work if the licensed electrician's there. So not only do you lose the one body, you lose 2 for every licensed electrician that's out with it. So it truly is a wild card. It's almost like you hold your breath every morning to see who's going to show up.
I remember my second question. It had to do with testing, testing for COVID. Are we supervising that testing on site, or how is that going, Miles? I'm just curious. Do they get tested every day? Do they get tested once a week?
We, across all of our jobs, do not have a daily testing requirement. It's usually dictated by the town, city, or sometimes project specific. Some of our jobs in life sciences, labs, healthcare do require testing, or do require, even at Harvard right now, some of our jobs, all the workers have to be fully vaccinated. At Needham Public Safety right now, that's not the case. We have 100% mask mandate right now, which is not the case in Needham, but we've enforced that to try to help keep this project still on the rails.
Okay. So they find out that they've tested positive when they get symptomatic, and the people they work for, one of the contractors that they work for, does the testing?
Or they
do
just,
the testing on
you wake up on a Saturday morning, don't feel well, and they get an appointment at CVS, come back positive, and then we hear from the field superintendent, staff, or the subcontractors, and we evaluate it with our safety team, where they're working, who they might have been in contact with, how we can clean that area, or for instance, the tile was the main lobby. So luckily we were just able to open the doors and create airflow. They were the only guys working in that area anyways, so they kind of just took themselves out, but we're able to keep the job moving.
Is there any possibility that some kind of testing protocol would help the situation?
Honestly, the biggest issue that we see on a daily basis is that there are folks on the projects who are not vaccinated, and we can't force them to get vaccinated. So if you start mandating testing, we could be faced realistically with an even bigger manpower issue if we're then pushing those guys away from even coming to the project.
I see. just throwing out the idea.
Yeah, it's just, George, it's honestly a really bad situation overall. We know with all of our self-perform guys, a couple months back, we inquired about their vaccination status and more framed it as, hey, we're not going to hold it against you if you're not vaccinated, but there are owners, Harvard being a good example, that we can't send you there if you're not vaccinated. So we at least need to know that for our staffing.
Yeah, you're between a rock and a hard place unless you have a requirement. Okay, I guess that answers my question. Not happy, but what are you going to do?
Thank you, George. So the question I have is, Ken, relative to the schedule, and just again, with what the number of people have been out, what kind of timeline do we have still some leeway in the timeline, or are we up against every single trade that drops a week, we lose a week? Is there any summary?
We're getting to that point, Stuart. I wouldn't say that we're absolutely at it, but we get Consigli does schedule updates every week, and we're monitoring it week by week as to what we're losing. But I would say right now we've got to hit that date that we had of the 8th that we've been pushing for the 8th for substantial completion. I would say we're at the point where we can't lose anymore. It's becomes at this point we're day to day.
The current schedule shows that we're really tight now.
Yeah, the good news is, outside of not being able to get them into get police into the building quicker, it's not like Fire Station 2 where there's a financial penalty in the sense that we don't get out of the temp station and continue to pay rent. It's just a matter of convenience now, as opposed to any kind of financial cost by not hitting that date.
Okay. Okay. I don't see any other hands up except George's. George, do you still have a question, or are you all set?
No, I'm all set.
Okay.
I'll take my hand down.
Okay, go ahead, Ken.
All right, we'll move to the ACL. Looking at some of the new ones from last month, we've got a coffee maker line for Fire Station 2, water cooler power at PD, and then the items that I mentioned in my email for the allowance overruns, which includes the ones that have been done so far, phase line costs, plaza foundations, winter conditions, temp utilities, and additional contingency are the ones that I mentioned in my email when I sent the agenda out.
I guess I'm pausing on the additional contingency. But these are the line items that we have coming up. Additional contingencies is what's left over.
Well, the additional contingency, the contingency's out. There's no money left in contingency.
Correct, except for what's been voted in.
No, this is I'm sorry, this is Consigli's contingency.
Got it.
The contractor's contingency.
Got it. Thank you. Okay,
Oh,
I'm good.
yeah.
I got it. Makes sense now. Okay.
All right. If there are no other questions on that, you can move into the voting items.
Okay. Let me just see. So you didn't send us. Hold on a
Yeah,
second.
do you want me to open up
Yeah, I
my
got it.
screen?
I got it. Okay. So the way we've got it ordered, if we could, we do the change order first, and then we'll go to the invoices. Okay, and we have put forth a change order number 30. This is 36, Ken.
Yeah, it's a typo. Sorry about that.
So it's 36 or 35?
It's 36.
Okay, so change order number 36. On your screen, it's number 35. It should be 36 for Consigli for $33,194 coming out of the general contracting budget. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you, Roy. Any questions? And I think probably the exposed piping in the Sally Port probably might be a question.
Yeah, we did. Well, if anyone's got questions, we have the answer. We discussed that
Yep.
last month when it first hit the ACL.
Yeah.
Or the month before, whenever it was. I don't remember when we popped that on there.
I had a question. It may have just skipped my mind, but can you explain the camera at Fire Station 2 for EMS? I
Yes,
forgot.
yeah, the fire department requested that there be a camera put inside the EMS room at Fire Station 2. It wasn't originally in the spec.
Wall-mounted camera, you mean?
Yeah, I don't know whether we're wall mounting it or we're hanging it, but it's in the middle of the room.
Okay,
it's
so
sealed
you're,
down.
right. Okay,
Okay. Any other questions?
is that
Hearing none.
remotely controlled or what?
No, it's wired into the regular camera system.
Okay,
Okay. Seeing none, hearing none, we will come to the vote. Roll call, Richard,
Aye.
Roy,
Aye.
George,
aye,
Erwin,
Aye.
Lynn,
Aye.
Jean,
Aye.
Chief Condon,
Aye.
Chief Schlittler,
Aye.
the chair is aye. Okay. We will go to the invoice for Consigli, the requisition number 36 through December 2021 for $1,689,897.05 coming out of the general contracting budget put forth for approval. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any questions? Hearing none, seeing none, coming to the vote. Richard,
Aye.
Roy,
Aye.
George,
aye,
Erwin,
Aye.
Lynn,
Aye.
Jean,
Aye.
Chief Condon,
Aye.
Chief Schlittler,
Aye.
chair's aye. Okay, put forth a invoice for Castle Booze, December 2021 services coming out of the architecture budget for $16,848.08. Do I hear a second?
second,
George, any questions? Seeing none, hearing none, coming to the vote. Richard,
Aye.
Roy,
Aye.
George,
aye,
Erwin,
Aye.
Lynn,
Aye.
Jean,
Aye.
Chief Condon,
Aye.
Chief Schlittler,
Aye.
chair's aye. Okay. All right, I'm going to group 6 invoices together coming out of the miscellaneous budget. First one is for pods for rental. There's usually 2 of these. The first one is in their same amount, $114.99. Second one for $114.99. A Needham Police invoice for details during September, $532. UTS materials testing invoice for $1,005. 2 invoices from Risk Frost Shumway. The first one is for $2,109. Second one is for $5,673. This is all coming out of the miscellaneous budget in total of $9,629.98. Do I hear a second?
second,
Thank you. Any questions? Hearing none. Coming to the vote. All right, Richard,
Aye.
Roy,
Aye.
George,
aye,
Erwin,
Aye.
Lynn,
Aye.
Jean,
Aye.
Chief Condon,
Aye.
Chief Schlittler,
Aye.
chair's aye. The last set is 3 invoices coming out of the technology budget. First one is Okers for audio-visual installation for $3,350. 2 more invoices, one for Harbor Networks, $1,796.30. These are courtesy licenses. The last one is a courtesy license from Harbor Networks, $512.22, total of $5,658.52 coming out of the tech budget. So here's a second.
Second.
Thank you. Any questions? Hearing none, seeing none, coming to the vote. Richard,
Aye.
Roy,
Aye.
George,
aye,
Erwin,
Aye.
Lynn,
Aye.
Jean,
Aye.
Chief Condon,
Aye.
Chief Schlittler.
Aye.
Chair is aye. I believe that's all the invoices for the public safety complex project.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Excellent. Any other final words, Ken?
Nope.
And any, do I dare say any questions from anybody else? Okay. All right. Thank you, Ken. And thank you to the user group, both chiefs.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All
Take
right.
care.
Thanks, guys.
Happy New Year to everybody.
Happy New Year to you.
Okay. All right. We are going to move to the next item, which is the school master plan. And I believe, Michael, you're the user rep now. Is Aaron also user rep?
No, Aaron is the rep for this project, I think, along with Ann technically. I'm just here because I'm keeping track of all the projects. So, but the voting rep is, I believe, Aaron and Ann. Is that correct, Aaron?
That's correct.
That's
Okay,
correct.
great. Thank you for clarifying. All right. Okay, who do I turn it over to? You, Hank?
Yeah, I think I will turn it over to Don, who can introduce the rest of his team. And this update we'll go through is largely based upon an adjustment in the schedule, delay by 1 year from the prior information that the team has seen, or the PBBC has seen. So Don, all yours.
Great, thank you, Hank. Hello, everyone. Happy New Year. Good to
Yeah.
see everyone again. Happy to be back. So what we wanted to do tonight is give you an update regarding the study work that we're doing. And if you recall, we saw you in November and talked about the study goals, which were to resolve the capacity and facilities issues at Mitchell, resolve facility issues at Pollard, and resolve capacity issues at High Rock. And taking this all into consideration to try to lower the financial investment in the upfront cost to the town. So those were our initial goals that we've been working through with Hank in the school department. And it's been an outstanding process, as they always are here in Needham. So tonight, what we want to do is share some of the different planning scenarios that we've gone through, the master planning timelines and priorities, enrollment versus capacity scenarios, and then a little update on the MSBA process. So it's going to take you through and peel back the curtain, let you know what we've been up to. So I'm going to turn it over to Michelle now to, I apologize. Michelle Rogers is here tonight, who's our project manager, and Jason Boone is our educational facilities planner. So they're both with me tonight. And I'm going to turn it over to Michelle right now to kick it off.
Thank you. Can you see my screen? It says update to master plan.
Yep.
Is that the correct one? Good. Great. So happy New Year, everyone. It's been a while since we've seen you. Through this study, one of the things that we discovered was the count for your elementary school classrooms. And right now you have 120 existing classrooms, and that is not counting the additional classrooms that you have in the modulars at the Mitchell School. To meet your current educational program, you need 126 classrooms. But ideally, it would be great if you could have 132. And that 132 number would allow you to have all the special programs that the district would like to include in their educational program. Things like a dedicated Spanish classroom, art room, music rooms, special rooms for your special education, and potentially technology and extended learning classrooms. We know they exist at the other schools, especially Semita. They're all built into that program there. And with 132 classrooms across your district, you could reorganize those spaces so that all of the schools could have that same parity and be able to offer those programs throughout the district. So that would be the ideal goal, and 126 classrooms at the elementary school level would be your what you need to meet those needs. In the middle school, we did a similar exercise. You have 86 classrooms and your minimum need is 101. And what we see here is that most of those classrooms are missing at the High Rock School, at the grade 6 classroom. Those rooms, because of the overcrowding that exists there, there's a lot of issues with not having dedicated spaces for a lot of the educational program that you're trying to provide. Therefore, you're sharing spaces, complicating schedules because you're moving teachers out from one space and into that space to teach whatever their special is, whether it be foreign language or health class or special education needs. And then to add to that complication, you're also sharing staff between the Pollard School and the High Rock School. So in addition to the scheduling that happens within the building itself, you're also trying to manipulate the staff. So 101 would be the minimum to meet that need across the middle school grade levels. We know that all the work that we've done is fairly complicated, and we tried to bring it down to a simple level and help you make the decisions that you're going to need to make to go forward. And so the first question that the district really needs to ask themselves is, does grade 6 belong on the Pollard School campus with grade 7 and 8? And that one decision will determine how big your Mitchell Elementary School needs to be. So on the right-hand side of this chart over here, if you choose to move grade 6 over to the Pollard School, you would then be looking at a Mitchell School, which is a 3-section school, and you'd be looking at 5 elementary schools because your High Rock would become your 5th elementary school. On the left-hand side over here, if you choose not to move the High Rock student campus over to the Pollard School, then you would follow this chart down and you would try to decide how big do you want that Mitchell Elementary School to be. It would need to be either a 5-section school or a 4-section school to meet that targeted 126 minimum classrooms. Now with a 5-section school, you would build that 5-section school on the Mitchell site. And the reason why we're showing that in a dotted line is because we really do feel that that might be too large for that site. You know, that's a large school for that site. If you were to go with a 4-section school, you would then have to add additional classrooms someplace else in that elementary school program, and the place to add that would be at the Elliott School. Regardless of which one you choose, either way, you would need to create a temporary modular school for either of these options in order to facilitate a building project on the Mitchell site. So if you look here and you follow this, this will be option A as we move forward, and option E as we move forward within our options. On the right-hand side, the difference between the two options that we're going to show you on this side, which would be option C or D, is the participation of the MSBA. So if the MSBA participates in the first project, which would be the Pollard School, that would be option C. And if they participate in the second project, which is the Mitchell School, that would be option D. So I know that's a lot of information to take in all at once. So if you want, I can pause for questions. You can just raise your hands if you have them. Great, I'm going to keep going.
I have one.
Go ahead.
I can't get my hand up fast enough. Sorry about that.
You can just wave at me, I can see you.
Okay. I'd like to go back to the assumption. Obviously, all of these scenarios depend on the assumptions you make at the very beginning. And a couple of questions about the assumptions. The first one, you mentioned that you think the Mitchell School site is potentially not big enough to put a 5-section school there.
Correct.
And on an equivalent basis, what do we have there today?
A 4-section school.
And we couldn't.
And just to be clear, it's a 4-section school, but it's undersized. So a 4-section school that we would propose would be bigger than the one that you have today.
It's
Single story, 2-story?
Currently, what we're showing on our footprints are 2 stories.
And we
We
couldn't.
felt that a 3-story might be difficult in that neighborhood.
Yeah, I just, I have something that's stopping me from saying I think we could put it on that site. It certainly would be different than it is now, but certainly I wouldn't want to give up on the idea of a 5-section school fitting on that site. I think I'd require that we really work hard to see what it would look like and what the scale
So
issues are.
we do have diagrams that show a 5-section school on that site. They follow the end of this, and when we get to the end, I can show you what those might look like.
We don't need to do that now, but I'm just saying, I think that's an assumption that we really would have to look at carefully. The other question that I have, the other assumption that I have is the assumptions that are based on current demographics. I don't want to get into a discussion of demographics unless everybody else wants to, but the demographics that we're seeing now, are they showing lesser number of students required than 2 years ago?
If you wait just 1 minute, I will show you the enrollment projections out from today out to 2036.
Okay,
I
but
see you, Hank and Erwin. So once George is done, I'll get you guys.
so my real question is, how does it relate to pre-pandemic versus current?
Yep.
I don't really care about projections for the future because I have a feeling that we're going to have numbers that are lower in the future for a lot of reasons than we are seeing even now. But anyway, that's up to somebody else.
We'll show you those numbers in just a moment because we've included both of those.
That's fine. And the last question I have is with regard to MSBA fitting in. On the left-hand side, where you make the assumption, the no assumption, are you saying that MSBA would not be involved in projects on that chart, option A and E?
No, the no is no, you do not move grade 6 to that campus.
Right, but I'm saying what would MSBA be involved in terms of projects on that chart, option A to option E? They'd be
Great
involved with
questions,
Mitchell.
George, and I'm going to answer those in just a minute.
Okay.
I'll show you in those timelines. Yep.
Okay. All right, good.
Okay, Hank?
Yeah, I think it's important to point out that the Sunita Williams School that replaced Hillside was almost exactly twice the size on a square footage basis as the original school. You have a very similar proportional ratio with Mitchell. The new school going on that site, just to be a 4-section school and meet the current MSBA standards, would therefore be twice the square footage of the existing school. A 5-section school is more in the scale of Newman. And putting a Newman scale building on the Mitchell site will definitely be tight. It will definitely impact the field areas and have substantially larger parking requirements than are existing today. So all of those factors weigh on the size of the 5-section school versus the 4-section school versus a 3-section school. Elliott is a 3-section school today. And one of the diagrams that Dorn Whittier has done takes that footprint and shows you what it looks like if transferred over to the Mitchell site.
Okay. All right, Erwin?
I'm just looking at really the totals and just looking at the dollars. Option A, and E are essentially the same. Whereas going with Pollard as a priority is about $70 to $80 million difference in cost. So what is the kind of the trade-off? There's got to be some benefit of the additional money that would be going with Mitchell as a priority, or am I just oversimplifying? Because it's fairly substantial if you look at the totals between those two pathways.
So in just a moment, you'll see why some of the numbers are adding up the way that they are. A lot of it has to do with project cost and escalation. And those are built into the timeline.
Okay.
And also modular classrooms.
All right, so in speaking about the MSBA, you know, we have a few things that we have to talk about when we talk about the MSBA, because as we all know, and for anybody who is listening in from the outside, MSBA is the Massachusetts School Building Authority, and an SOI is a statement of interest. When we submit a statement of interest, it is not a guarantee into the program. It is just your first step into that program. And sometimes it takes several SOIs to be accepted in. There is no queue. You have to keep submitting every single year. It's not like you submit and therefore you go up in the queue, in the line. You just keep submitting, and it is a competitive program. So there's 353 towns in Massachusetts. Lots of them have building needs. Lots of them are submitting SOIs every year. If your project rises to the top, then that's when you're invited in. And the idea behind funding two projects at the same time, the MSBA, you have to choose your priority project. You cannot say, we want to do both projects. You can't go in and ask for both the Pollard and the Mitchell School at the same time. You have to choose which one's more important at that time. And that's the one that gets the most attention. And then again, the final piece of this is we have built our timelines and our assumptions around the fact that a Pollard school would be an addition and renovation, and a Mitchell school would be a new school. There are no guarantees with that either. All of that occurs as you're going through the feasibility study process. And those of you who might remember the Hillside project, we started with having to study what an addition and renovation for that building would look like, what a new building on that site would look like, and then finally what a new building on another site was. All of that is part of your feasibility process. So again, in our timelines, we are making some assumptions, but all of those actually work themselves out in that feasibility study when you're invited into the MSBA process. So just recapping what those scenarios are, and the reason why the numbering is a little bit different, in our first master plan, not so long ago, we had options A, B, C, and D. We've come back this time with revisions to options A, C, and D, and then we've added the new E option. A and E are called status quo options, and that is because we've maintained the same grade configuration. So we've kept grade 6 as a single campus, and we've maintained the same buildings. So you still have two middle schools and 4 elementary schools. So that is your status quo. The difference between the A and the E scenarios is how big is the Mitchell School. So again, in option A, it's a 5-section school. And in option E, it's a 4-section school, and you're making up the additional classrooms with a project over at Elliott. In the C and D options, the difference between these are when the MSBA is participating. So in option C, you're asking the MSBA to participate in that first project, which would be Pollard. And that would be a 6 through 8 school. And then you would come back and see, you would ask if they would participate in that second project. They may or they may not do 2 projects in a row, but your priority project would be the Pollard School. In option D, the town would take on the Pollard School as on their own and go and ask the MSBA to participate in the Mitchell School. And I'm going to show you why those two things make a difference when we start laying out the timelines. Oops, sorry.
Erwin, do you have a question?
Yep.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No problem. Just want to check.
Thank you. Sorry.
We moved too fast. Here we go. And our final assumption in our timelines is the MSBA process. So when you submit your SOI, your statement of interest, it takes about 2 years from the time that you submit They accept you in approximately a year and approximately another year to formulate your team, which is your OPM and your designers. And then you're about a year to a year and a half to go through that feasibility and schematic design process. And then the funding for that project varies, half year to about 6 to 9 months. And then detailed design and usually approximately 2 years for construction project. So overall, the timeline is between 6.5 to 7.5 years. And so we've used the conservative amount of time in laying out these timelines. We've used the 7.5 years. If you were to do a project on your own, you would reduce this timeline by a year to a year and a half, and maybe even 2 years in some cases, because you would be reducing this 2-year process. You would not have to go to the MSBA or wait for them to accept you. You could formulate your team very quickly, so that you would be reducing that 2-year process. And then depending on how you funded the project, you could actually reduce the funding timeline as well.
We had a reduced
All right.
timeline. And we had a reduced timeline on Sunita Williams.
Yes, we
Do
did.
you remember what the total time was from beginning to end? Was it 6 years?
It was about 6.5, 6.25. Yep.
So even though we went
And
through
a
all
lot
the
of-
steps, we reduced some of them by pushing MSBA into
Mhm.
our timeline, not theirs.
Yes, you did. And so when I first started this, I thought I would use the Sunita Williams timeline. And then I realized that it's better to be conservative at this point in time. But, you know, we
I would
all know
agree.
that time is money. So if you can save that time, you can save a substantial amount of money as well. And so that's one thing that we should mention as I start to talk about this money, is that the project total cost that you're seeing has escalation across the board at 4.5%. So we've escalated the timeline, the cost of the projects as we've laid out the timelines as well. I'm going to walk you through this timeline, and once you see it, I know there's a lot of information on here. So once you understand this one, it'll be easier to understand all of them. So what you're going to see on these timelines is the project itself, which are these larger boxes, Mitchell in green, a temporary building in gray, Pollard is yellow, High Rock is this peachy color, Elliott, when you do see it, will be blue. So you see the projects, you see the square footage of the project, a brief description, a 5-section school under AA. You also see the cost of that project. And again, these costs are escalated to fit within the timelines that they're being cited. You see the start date of the project when you're submitting your SOI, and you see the occupancy date. And something else that you see here is the cost of the capital improvements to maintain those buildings. So in this case, it would be maintaining Mitchell for 7 years and maintaining Pollard for another 11 years until you can begin a construction project with them. In this case, Mitchell, you'd be submitting your SOI, and then you'd actually have to go and ask for funding to build this temporary project. You'd build that temporary project, and you can't start this project until you've moved the students off-site into that temporary building, and then you can begin that project. And you would see students moving into that Mitchell school in 2030 under this timeline. And by the way, all timelines start in April of 2023. And this temporary project is currently outlined to be at DeFazio Park. So you would walk through this building, then you'd move into the Pollard School. Again, the same process, submitting an SOI, going through the project and occupancy in 2038. If you are not received into the SOI, received into the MSBA feasibility study, then you would have to prepare funding for this to begin the design by April 2030. And then you would come back and do an addition and renovation project to the High Rock School. And your completed timeline under the AA scenario would be done in 2046. And down below, you'd see the cost of all the projects, all the major projects, as well as the cost of the capital improvement plans across that scenario.
We do have one question, Michelle, unless you want to. Yeah, Barry, do you want to have a question?
Yeah, I'm just looking at the not to exceed, the 3-year, and then the assume 11 years. So
Right.
the Paula, is my video? Oh, sorry. You can't see me. Here I am. So the 5.7 million over 3 years, over 3 years prior to the start of construction or the submission to the MSBA?
Any 3-year period. So what happens within the 3-year
Okay.
period is
Right.
if you go over that amount, you're going to trigger some of those improvements that would then get you into a bigger building project. So if you trigger the ADA trigger or
Right, so
something, then you're,
this is more of a local trigger. Some of this is really more of a local trigger, not so much an MSBA determination trigger.
oh, correct. So the capital improvement plan has nothing to do with MSBA.
Got it. Okay, all right. Yeah, we don't want to go past something where we're like, now I have to install sprinklers throughout the entire building or something like that. I got it. Okay.
Exactly,
All
exactly.
right. Thank you.
So this is the AA scenario, which is the status quo. And then the E scenario is built very much the same all the way through September 46. But then because we have the Elliott project, it goes on into 2053. Remember, this is a 4-section Mitchell school. And then we're adding classrooms to the Elliott school to make up that additional classroom to meet our needs.
And Michelle, if I could just add here, the key difference between either of these two scenarios and what we looked at in the 2019 study is that these are now concretely sequential, where previously many of these projects were happening concurrently in an effort to minimize the overall project cost, where in this exploration, we're attempting to minimize the cost at any one moment.
Thank you. That was an important fact. So by spreading it out, it costs more, but the cost to the district is in smaller pieces. So George, you had asked about the impact to the enrollment based on these scenarios. So this is looking at the elementary school enrollment and looking at the Mitchell SE 5-section school. So currently what you see in the yellow bar is your current capacity. And this is district-wide elementary school. So district-wide, the purple is your best no COVID forecast. And the gray was your high without any COVID. The orange, best no COVID. And then the blue is what we saw. You can actually see the dipping from what we thought was going to happen with COVID. And now what we think is actually happening is in the purple. So you are going along your capacity within the elementary schools are within this range of your classroom sizes. And when you build the 5-section school for Mitchell and you occupy that school in 2030, you would then be able to have your classrooms be right within the middle of that capacity range, which is really where you want those numbers. You don't want to be maximizing your class sizes as best you can. You want to be trying to keep those lower as we go across the board. So I have lots of graphs like this. Does everybody understand the timelines as well as the capacity pieces? So this is at the elementary school level under the AA scenario.
Hold on a second, Michelle. George, you had a question?
I did have one more, and that is when we're considering putting temporary facilities at DeFazio, there's a certain cost associated with that, but did you also include costs of infrastructure for that site on top of the temporary facilities, classroom facilities?
So we know that some of that infrastructure would be staying. And so, yeah, so that 40, I think it was $40 million, $37 million, depending on which option you're looking at. That's all included in that. So there's a lot of issues for groundwater, stormwater management.
Exactly.
In
Those
order
are all
to make
included?
that facility work. Yes.
So essentially, we're going to go in there and do whatever has to be done infrastructure wise, then put or include in that the classroom facilities, temporary classroom facilities, and or some of that I think we looked at as potentially permanent, not just temporary for classrooms, but other things. That's all included in that 40 million or no?
So you had a 4-section school and you had the parking lot pavement and the ground improvement to that that was required.
Okay.
Yes.
So when you're finished with that as temporary, no buildings stay?
That's up to you.
In our
Okay.
original
You don't-
explorations,
Included in
George,
those numbers, the removal of that building.
my memory, George, is that when we test fit the temporary facility on the DeFazio site, the gymnasium, for example, may have been permanent construction, but the classrooms themselves were meant to be removed at the conclusion of their use, if that's what you're asking about.
Yeah, yes, that is. Okay, so there'll be some potential out of that 40 million that will be permanent structure that could stay at that site and be utilized by the town at that site and add to the inventory of buildings used or that would be effectively used for the town.
Yeah, but I do want to be clear. I don't think it was a full-size gymnasium. It was an activity room.
Okay,
So-
but I wanted to know that at least the infrastructure, especially the groundwater systems and so forth, all that stuff is included.
All set, George?
All set.
Okay, thanks, George. Aaron? Aaron, did you have your hand up?
Aaron, you're muted.
I see no hand.
Sorry.
There you go.
Percentage of the cost of that 40-ish million would be on these permanently usable facilities for the town versus the completely temporary classroom facilities?
I'm not sure. I'd have to go back and take a look.
Okay.
And I do want to say too that, you know, that since we did that original stormwater management, there has been some changes to the conservation needs. So that would have to probably be upgraded. So we would have to go back and take another look at that as well.
I think the site investment was in the $5 to $10 million range. And the balance was building.
I recall that too, Hank. But, okay.
I have a silly question, and it may have already been answered. How long would the temporary facility be needed? What's the duration of the use of it?
That was a good point. Thank you. So you would build it, but you would use it. You would only have to occupy it for 2 years. So you would move in.
$50 million to occupy a space for 2 years. And again, here's another question that may have already been answered again. Was Hillside considered as a potential to save money, because most of the infrastructure is there? Obviously there would need to be renovation, but I'm sure it was considered, but remind me.
It's not a silly question. So yes, it was considered. Unfortunately, because it has converted over to a business use, it would have to be converted back to educational, which would be upgrading that entire facility, doing all the work that we would have, you know, adding the sprinklers for the full building, adding the seismic, adding the ADA in order to make it even a temporary facility.
As well as upgrading the entire envelope, all the electrical, mechanical. Plus it would be, it would still have the contamination associated with the site.
And you might even need some modular buildings to go along with that.
I think the assumption would be that those modulars at Mitchell would be moved over.
It's an expensive project. It's probably cheaper to put modulars in like we did at Newman.
So looking at the E forecast for the elementary schools, you can see that building that 4-section school for Mitchell does not actually change the capacity across the district. And in fact, the district capacity doesn't change for 17 years beyond this forecast when you actually complete the timeline by adding those additional classrooms to the Elliott School. For those same A and E options, when we look at the High Rock School, you can see here that the High Rock School remains over capacity for 10 years beyond this timeline until you've gone back and added the addition in 2046 to the High Rock School. And because the Pollard School is the school that is chosen to go first, the Pollard School is actually the one that recognizes the first improvement. So you can see here within the purple line here is your projected enrollment for grade 7 and 8. And then you complete the addition and renovation, and then you've increased the capacity within that school at that time. So those are timelines A and E. And now when we move into timelines C and D, you're going to see that the Pollard School goes first. And in this scenario, you're choosing to do it with the MSBA. So you're submitting your SOI to the MSBA next year. And then 7 years later, you would fully occupy a newer renovations and additions to that school and move grade 6 in. And once grade 6 moves into this school, the Mitchell population can move into the High Rock School. So when you think about the difference between the timelines of A and E, Mitchell was moving out of their school into a temporary facility in 2028 and into their new school in 2030. And in this scenario, they would be moving into the High Rock facility in 2030. So they'd be moving, regardless of which scenario you choose, the Mitchell community would be moving into a updated facility by 2030. Once you have established that this is the route you're going, you can actually start submitting your SOI for your 3-section school to the MSBA. And then once again, there's that if you get in the second time, because you've just completed a project, the Pollard School project with the MSBA, if you get in, great. And if you don't, the town would have to understand that they would be funding the Mitchell School, the 3-section school, on their own, so that you could begin design for that school by 2031. And in this case, your capital improvements are reduced for both the Mitchell School as well as the Pollard School. And you're completed with this timeline by 2036.
And so,
And then-
Michelle, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Before we move on, so one of the key differences by Pollard going first is that it opens up High Rock as swing space for the Mitchell project at a much friendlier price point, roughly $400,000 rather than $40 million. And it will position High Rock long-term as the 6th elementary school in the district. And Michelle's going to show how that capacity changes in just a minute. So that's one of the key differences between the A and E options and now the C and D options when Pollard actually goes first, is that there's no longer a need for that temporary swing space for a project at the Mitchell site.
The difference between C and D is that the town would take on the Pollard School by themselves, which would reduce that timeline. So by reducing the timeline by a year for the Pollard School, you can also begin to submit your SOI for the Mitchell School earlier, because they will be your first MSBA project. And in doing that, you can reduce the overall timeline by about 2 years. It does mean taking on the bigger project, the town taking on the bigger, more expensive project, which is the Pollard School first. And then by doing so, you have a 2 years earlier for the final Mitchell project and 1 year earlier for moving students from the the Mitchell site into the High Rock School.
I have a couple of questions.
Yep.
Lynn?
I just wanted to harken back to the November presentation. I thought that somebody actually commented, and I think it was you, Michelle, that the MSBA might have more acceptance as the Mitchell School as the prime school versus the Pollard. And if we were really gonna bet on one or another that would be accepted more readily, was it not the Mitchell School? Would that impact our decision-making?
I'm going to blame that one on Jason for saying that. We do feel like your neediest school is the Mitchell School, but we also feel that if there's an opportunity to lay out the master plan with the MSBA and show them that by solving the Pollard School first, you're actually solving more problems all at once. And if you begin to have this conversation.
Yeah, you're solving a larger problem with Pollard, even though Mitchell is by school, the needier school.
Correct. And if you know, there's some kind of thinking that if you went to them with the Pollard School and said, this is all we want from you, we won't ever come back, and you took on Mitchell by yourself, which is a smaller, less expensive project, comparatively speaking, you might be able to, you know, convince them that this is the way to go, that you're solving district-wide problems by creating the addition to and renovation of one school.
And I think that MSBA is looking at it as on an individual school basis rather than holistically like we're trying to do. And they also, I don't think, have the same perspective of total cost to the town the way we do. I'm just guessing.
Aaron, you have your hand up?
Yeah. Thank you. Can you just remind me, I think part of why we engaged in this exercise was to see if there was a way to split the Pollard project up into an earlier chunk and a later chunk. And I guess that didn't work out, but if I could just hear a little about why that's not a good idea.
Jason, you want to speak a little bit about or
Yeah,
exploring of the grade 6 school independent?
So early when we started this master plan extension, we felt like there was an opportunity to spend money on just the addition at Pollard and have it freestanding and not attached to the existing building. Therefore, we wouldn't need to update the existing building and spend, you know, that financial investment all at once. But what we came to realize is that from a construction phasing point of view, you need 6th grade to be able to move over onto campus in order to realize the effect for the Mitchell students. And so if you can imagine trying to execute a phased occupied renovation of the existing school with all 3 grades on the campus, having that addition be freestanding turned out to not be as advantageous as we had originally thought. Does that help explain what you're asking about?
Yeah.
And in a sense, it's similar to the high school phasing where students moved, a new section was built, students moved into that section, renovation occurred on another piece, partial demolition. It'd be a similar sequencing that goes on.
And if the 6th grade had moved over prior to the renovation of the existing building, that missing square strategy wouldn't have been available to us anymore.
I think it's also going back to the MSBA. I'll take Concord, who is currently trying to build a middle school. Concord applied 4 years in a row with their SOI to the MSBA and were denied all 4 years. And they eventually came to the decision that it was cheaper to proceed on their own dime than to continue going back with no guarantees that the MSBA will participate at all. So delaying and waiting for MSBA, costs don't go down. in that period of time. And I think it's important to remember that.
And Wellesley, in their two-school project, they wanted to do them both at once and do one MSBA and one without the MSBA.
And we made an excellent decision back when we rehabbed the High Rock School. We did that on our own dime, and we were able to really rapidly accelerate the construction on that site. And I don't know how much money we returned to the town, but it was a substantial amount of money that we returned to the town because we found that we saved a lot of money by doing that. So we, you know, and a number of you have probably heard me, whether it's speaking out of turn or not, but just being me, and saying it's a lot easier if you do it yourself as a town. Yes, there's funding that you can get from MSBA, but if you look at the Senator Williams project, for example, we saved, as Michelle mentioned, a year and a half or so by pushing their schedule, and therefore saved the project a lot of money. Yeah, we got money back from MSBA as well, and I don't say that was not peanuts. It was good to get that amount, but you know, we may want to consider that.
Any more questions? Don't want to miss
Don't see
anybody.
any more? Nope, see any more?
So taking these two options and going through the same exercise that we did a few moments ago with the A and the E's, this shows the Pollard School 7 and 8 up to the time of when a new project would be open, up to 2030. And the High Rock School up to 2030. And then once you move them both together, you would have the Pollard, and now you would have all of the schools. So once you open that addition and renovation, you are now operating at your minimum class size, not your maximum. You've recognized 101 classrooms within that building. You're beginning to offer all the programs, the special education, the technology, and all those other programs that are trying to be offered currently and are space prohibitive within that building. When you look at the Mitchell School, you've moved out of the Mitchell School in 2030 into the High Rock. And yes, you're going to be working at your higher class range until you open your 3-section school on the Mitchell site. And at that point, across the district, you can be working within your minimum class range for the rest of time. We don't go beyond 2036 in this. But once you do that, you can work across the board in your elementary schools and provide all the educational programs within all the schools.
So Michelle, if I could just put that purple line in context in that dip in capacity while the Mitchell site is vacant and the High Rock facility is occupied as an elementary school. The distance between the black dotted lines represents 4 students. And so while the class size capacity differs by grade level, each one of those guidelines has a 4-student window. And so when that line has creeped above that black dotted line, in scale, you're 1 student over your guideline in some classrooms. You're not, over your class size guideline for that window by 10 students per classroom or even 5 students per classroom. So the question on the table during that window is that tightness, worth the few years it takes to execute a 3-section project over at Mitchell with High Rock serving as the swing space or not?
Thank you, Jason. I think that's an important piece. Thank you. And then, so finally, what we wanted to show you, because we know that we've given you a lot of information, is trying to simplify it. Our 4 scenarios currently, you can see them across the board here at the top. The cost for each is identified, the years to completion. is identified. And then in the green boxes, it's a number of major building projects for each of those scenarios. So in the E scenario, you have 4 projects, but you also have that temporary construction project, which doesn't show up here. In the A scenario, you have 3, but again, you also have the temporary project. And in both the C and the D, you really only have 2 major construction projects. We show some work being done at the High Rock, but again, it is fairly minimal. We look at it as almost a summer slammer, changing toilets, making some things more accessible to younger students and those kinds of things. With that, that is the end of our show. If you have any questions.
Who has this been presented to besides us?
So we have not presented this entire presentation to anyone yet. We do have an upcoming presentation to the Mitchell community, which has some similar information. We've been working with the working group, of course. It's been presented to them, but publicly it has not been presented. We do have an upcoming school committee meeting as well, where we will be presenting this. I think it's this exact presentation to them as well.
It's on the 18th, and George, this full presentation has been sent to the school committee, so they receive the information at the same time as the PBBC.
Because they're so integral to the process, is there any attempt been made to reach out to the FinCom to have them either attend one of these sessions like the school committee or to make a presentation to them?
I think the next step the town manager was looking for and the superintendent was looking for was to present to the facilities financing working group.
Okay.
And to enable this information to be processed by Dave Davison. Really having Dave go through the financial analysis so that FinCom can digest the budget limits and the borrowing limits associated with each of these schemes. The town manager has suggested that it'd be, if possible, to winnow it down to 2 or 3 options that get detailed scrutiny because of the extent of work that has to be done to prepare those financial analyses. And so she was looking for perhaps sometime in February to convene that facilities financing working group.
That's a good idea. We haven't had a meeting for about 6 or 7 months, I think.
Correct.
And just to add on, to that briefly, George, Josh Levy from FinCom has participated in all of our meetings throughout the entirety of the process. So we're assuming that he's been reporting back periodically to FinCom about our progress. But
yeah, Josh is good, but I think the whole committee needs to hear it at some point.
Aaron, you have a question?
Yeah, Michelle and Jason, I know this is not exactly in your wheelhouse, and maybe it's just a rough answer that you could give, but you know, the challenge with the prior options was the stacking of the amount of money within a few years. Is there any way to say yet sort of how the peak year of expense in these scenarios are different than in the old scenarios or anything, or do we have to wait for Dave to run it through?
What do you mean by the peak years? You mean how, like originally we were overlapping projects. We were, as soon as you finished one, you were starting the next with actual costs. So once you finished construction, you were actually starting design or construction of the next project. In this one, we've stretched it so that maybe you're overlapping your statement of interest, which is really no cost to the district. As you sit there and gather your team, you know, that 2-year window doesn't really cost a lot of money. So we've overlapped that time period, but we've let the rest of it fall off the end. So if you're asking like how much on a yearly basis that the town would be asking for. I think Dave would have that in his numbers. He would be able to figure out how much exactly, but it's a little bit hard to tell because you don't know how much, your monthly expenses on construction are going to be, but you might be able to say over the 2-year period, you could break it down into quarters or something. You could take a look at it and see what we can do for you to get those numbers.
And it also factors in the existing debt that the town has and the declining balance with that existing debt. So his analysis is more robust than what the team can really produce at this time.
Yeah, I mean, I was just hoping, but I guess I think it's too complicated. I was hoping for sort of a back of the envelope, just a sense of it. But, I think the numbers that really stopped everybody in the financial working group before were the peak year annual average tax bill increase from all the combined projects. And it's pretty hard to get to that without Dave doing a lot of work.
Okay. Any
Aaron,
other-
Sue, I don't seem to have the raise hand here.
ahead.
To Aaron's point, I mean, the two things that you're doing, I'm just looking at the original High Rock as ES grade 6 Pollard scenario. They are right on top of each other. So by sliding them out, you gain a little bit of time. You gain a little bit on helping to reduce our current debt by not starting them for another couple of years. It's not going to be huge in terms of the overall debt load, but it may reduce those peak years a bit because you're still basically spending a lot of money on projects. We've had to do this before. I'm not sure there's any getting away from that, but this might help in the peak year a little bit. But Dave's the only one who can do that with any credibility for the finance committee, or really for us.
Okay. Hank, are we all set?
Unless there are any other questions, I think
I don't see any more.
there's only one other voting item. That's not on this project.
Correct. And do we need would Ann support the?
Yes, Ann would be a voting member of the Emery Grover project.
Okay, great. So we'll close down the item of the school master plan. We have PVC other business. We have 2 items there. One is the Emery Grover. So for the sake of the school master plan group, thank you very much. And Happy New Year to you all.
Stuart, I did have one other quick comment if I could. And that is, I was concerned, the reason I asked the question about who has it been delivered to. What was the first group? Was it a Mitchell School Group or something like that?
The working group is
Working group, I don't have a problem with.
Yeah, the Mitchell School, we would only be presenting to them that the broad options and a portion of the show that the PVBC saw maybe 2 months ago with some of the variations in terms of construction on the Mitchell School site. So they will not see the full presentation.
What group is this?
It's the Mitchell School Council, and it includes members of the faculty and members of the Parent Teachers Association, I believe. But George, unless they have been listening in on our discussions with the PVBC or with the school committee prior presentations, they probably will not even have seen the very first phase of this study.
Well, that's
And
why I was concerned. I think certainly school committee or the superintendent should make sure that that's an appropriate group to give that presentation to, especially since other groups haven't even seen it yet. unless, you know, that there maybe it's just for information only, just to give them an update. But I'm always concerned about giving people too much information. I don't want to hide any information, but I'd like it to just people know who the group is and why they should be the group that we present to when it hasn't been presented to others. But anyway, that's simply a concern that I had.
We'll discuss that with the superintendent.
Okay, good.
Great. Okay. Well, thanks to all the school master plan group. And if I could just hold the committee back, and also you, Ann.
Thank you.
Thanks all. Happy New Year
Thank you
to
all.
you, group.
Thank you.
Okay, from a PVC standpoint, we have two items. One is a voting item that I'd like to cover if I could. It's the Emery Grover. It's an invoice from BH&A for their November 2021 services for $10,687.50 coming out of the miscellaneous budget. I put forth for approval to the committee. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay. Go through the roll call. Richard,
Aye.
Roy,
Aye.
George,
Aye.
Erwin,
Aye.
Lynn,
Aye.
Jean,
Aye.
and
Aye.
chair's aye as well. Okay, thank
And
you.
you include me, because I'm the second rep for the Emery River project. Just
And Michael.
consistent.
Did you say aye?
Aye, yes.
Michael?
Aye.
Okay, I didn't hear. I just want Catherine to be able to hear that for you. All right, great. Thank you. All right. So for the committee to hold back with just one other item, there was a question, I think Catherine raised it, the Nuwari statement that's been out there. I think it came into our email boxes back in the late spring, I believe. And the question is whether we have voted to acknowledge it. And we could not find any voting item for that. So we've been asked, every town committee has been asked to review and vote on the Nuwari statement. So I would just put forth for this discussion. I'm not saying we need to dissect what Nuwari is and argue, you know, all in its pieces, unless that is an issue. So the question is, I think really, can't even speak. Have folks been able to review that? Are they aware of it? And is it something that we could put forth for a voting item tonight, or would everybody prefer, the majority prefer to step back and the next meeting review and vote it, acknowledge it?
I have a dumb question. What is the purpose of having us vote on it? What is it that we're voting on? Do they want everybody, all the committees to say, yes, we agree that this is a good statement? You know, my feeling is in general that I've been following what the select board has been approving. I'm not sure that they are asking, is the select board asking all the committees to review it and offer comments? Or I guess I'm dumbfounded. What are we supposed to vote on?
Let me just pull up specifically.
See, I don't see it as a voting item.
Has it been formally presented to the PVC? If so, can you find the meeting minutes from the PVC? Okay. So the question is, has the vision statement been formally presented to the PVC? I believe the answer is yes, and I think it's a question of acknowledging that that's been presented. Is Hank, you're there, Hank. Any comments from you, Hank?
Yeah, I think that there are other committees that feel that it's a select board policy question and really not necessarily within their remit, but other committees have endorsed, I believe, have endorsed the statement. So I'm not quite sure, and I guess we need to ask.
Yeah, I think the formal question is, the select board asked other town boards, committees, and commissions to consider adopting the vision statement for racial equity in Needham, created by the Needham Unite Against Racism Initiative, known as NUARI, working group. And the question is, have we voted to adopt the vision statement? That's what the ask was back then. And if no one's received any information on it, I will forward it and suggest that we come back to this question in the next meeting. I believe the way things are written, both in the communication and the purpose, it's not a mandatory. I think it's a request. If we agree, would we consider adopting it to help support the equity in the town? And as a board, as a committee, we would also be adopting consideration within what we do and within the board.
So can you share it? And I would second that if that's what you want to do. I would like to read it in more detail before we talk about it and vote on it, if that's what we're doing.
And aren't they just asking you to say, but isn't the request if it's been presented? And so I have something that you emailed to us back in June 23rd. I just read it, it took 2 seconds. It's different to say that it's been presented. If we don't have a reason to vote on it, why are we voting on it?
Well, they're asking us to adopt the statement as part of our
statement. What does that mean?
Well, I really need to know what that means. And I'd like someone from the select board or the town manager to tell us why we, as a committee responsible for the things we're responsible for, need to adopt that. I would need some more information about what it is that we're adopting and why.
Okay, Erwin?
Yeah, if you can just echo what Lynn said, if you can just, I don't know where that statement is, if it was sent out. If you can just resend it so I can at least look at it. I kind of feel similar to George. I'm not sure what the purpose is of us taking a vote, but I'd like to at least see what the statement is.
Right.
Okay, so I will.
I just want to say, Stuart, I would vote to support it versus adopt it. The language is bothering me because I think the concept of adopting something is a little bit more firm than saying, yes, we believe in this and support it,
Okay, so what I'll do is I will take the action, and I don't think we should vote or do anything. I'll take the action and forward the email with the statements. So you all have that. If I could ask you, Hank, maybe to touch base with Kate and the working group in Nuwari, is that what we can do is have a representative maybe come to our next meeting, and we could spend, I don't think we should spend a great deal of time if we read the statement, but I think what I'm hearing is a very respectful request. What are they asking us to do and why? So we can debate that amongst ourselves and decide the action we'll take.
Yes, I just forwarded that on to everyone.
Oh, okay, thank you.
In the committee. And the request was from Katie King. I will talk to Katie and to Kate to request their coming to the meeting. Our next meeting.
Great. Is that acceptable to all? Any objections amongst the group? Okay.
It looks like on Needham's website, there is if you search Nuwari Needham, there is a link to the vision statement. And right below it, there is a vision statement endorsement list. And I think it lists all the boards and committees that endorsed it. But I'm not sure that means voted, just endorsed it.
I think the endorsement for the PVC to endorse it, we'd have to vote a motion to endorse it, is what I think. And then I think it's reasonable questions what they're asking. And I think then the committee would have, as individual members, would have a commentary or a position that they could take. We can determine that next meeting.
Yeah.
That'd be my recommendation. Okay. I think with that, then that's really all I have. Is there any other business from the committee members?
Do we anticipate a second meeting in January?
Hank?
I guess this might be the only, or the primary topic. We are progressing with Emery Grover and Hillside. I'm not sure that we'll be at a point where we have any financial updates on those two projects.
Any invoices or financial decisions?
I would expect that we'd have invoices
Well,
coming in.
I would leave that up to you guys, but I was just curious if we had any thoughts about that.
Yeah, I think right now what we've done consistently over the last 6 months is held it, and then come next week, if there isn't anything really needed to discuss and vote, then we'll push to the next meeting. I don't think the Nawari is a critical date item, and it only really is. And Hank, we'll just come back maybe next week to the committee and let them know whether we're going to need a meeting or not. Probably
Okay.
late Friday or Monday, we'll do that. Okay.
And do we have any further updates on whether or not we could continue Zoom meetings after April or March?
Yes, I believe it's June. Is it not? Is at least the next date? Isn't that correct, Hank or Catherine? I thought when we spoke.
I
haven't
believe
heard-
it's April 1st.
It is
April 1st,
April.
we need to go back, as far as I've heard. I haven't heard anything beyond
That
April.
hasn't been extended by the legislature?
Not
the
at this
current-
point.
No.
It will be.
But I'm assuming
yet.
it will be.
It
I'm
will
assuming
be.
I'm assuming it will be. They'll probably do it at the last minute, but
Well, that's what
Anyway,
they did
it's-
last time.
okay. Thanks.
Okay. Great. Thanks. All good questions. Okay. If that's it, I appreciate everybody's time. Have a great night. And for those football fans, enjoy the championship game.
Yes, and go Patriots this Saturday night.
There
Yes.
you go. There you go.
Happy New Year,
Excellent.
everybody.
Happy
You
New
too.
Year.
Everyone,
Here,
see ya.
You too.
Catherine, do you want to hang for just 1 second?